Japanese commander disappeared after Midway. 82 years later, secret Indonesian estate found. March 17, 2024. The morning sun breaks over the remote hills of West Java, Indonesia, casting long shadows across a construction site 14 kilometers southwest of Bandung. A team of Indonesian construction workers, contracted to expand the rural highway system, drives excavation equipment through dense vegetation that has reclaimed this hillside for 8 decades. At 9:47 a.m. local time, the lead excavator's blade strikes something that shouldn't exist. Not rock, not tree roots, concrete. Reinforced concrete 2 meters beneath the surface, showing construction techniques inconsistent with local building practices. The operator, 34-year-old Dimas Prasetyo, shuts down his machine. Within the hour, the site supervisor contacts the Indonesian Archaeological Institute. Dr. Sidi Rahayu arrives 2 days later with a team from the University of Indonesia's Department of History. What they uncover over the following 6 weeks will shatter the accepted historical record of one of World War II's most pivotal naval battles. The concrete forms the roof of an underground structure, a bunker built with Japanese military specifications, complete with ventilation systems, reinforced walls 40 centimeters thick, and a layout matching Imperial Japanese Army engineering manuals from 1943. Inside, preserved by the dry volcanic soil of West Java, investigators discover a sealed chamber. The room measures 4.2 meters by 3.8 meters. Along the eastern wall sits a deteriorated wooden desk. On that desk, in a metal document case showing advanced corrosion but still intact, lie papers that will require immediate authentication by international experts. The documents include a Japanese Imperial Navy officer's identification booklet. The photograph shows a stern-faced man in his early 40s, wearing the uniform of a commander in the combined fleet. The name printed in both kanji and romanized text reads, Taman Yamaguchi. Birth date, August 17, 1892. Rank at time of document issue, Rear Admiral. Assignment, Commander Carrier Division 2, Mobile Force. According to every historical record, every naval archive, every documented account of the Battle of Midway, Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi died on June 5, 1942. He supposedly went down with his flagship, the aircraft carrier Huryu, choosing to remain aboard the sinking vessel rather than evacuate. His death was recorded as one of the most honorable in Imperial Japanese Navy history, a samurai's end, faithful to the warrior code of Bushido. The U.S. Naval War College teaches his final stand. Japanese historians memorialize his sacrifice. His memorial tablet rests in Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo. But here, beneath Indonesian soil, 5,400 kilometers from where Yamaguchi supposedly died, lies evidence suggesting a dramatically different story. The identification papers are accompanied by navigation charts marked with handwritten annotations in Japanese, a diary with entries spanning from July 1942 to November 1958, 16 years of life after his supposed death. Photographs showing the same stern face, now aged, weathered, standing beside tropical vegetation that exists nowhere near Midway Atoll. Most damning, a letter dated September 3, 1945, 3 days after the formal Japanese surrender aboard the USS Missouri, addressed to someone named Kenji, written in the elaborate kanji style used by educated imperial officers. The letter's opening line, translated by Dr. Rahayu's team, reads, "The war has ended, but my war ended 3 years ago when I made the choice that history must never know." The Indonesian Ministry of Culture immediately seals the site. By March 28, 2024, forensic specialists from Japan's National Institute of Historical Research arrive, along with U.S. naval intelligence historians and independent researchers from Oxford University's Department of War Studies. They bring equipment for document analysis, handwriting comparison, and soil dating. What they're about to uncover will require rewriting one of World War II's most documented moments. If you want to see what investigators found in that sealed chamber, what those diary entries revealed about the most elaborate escape in naval history, hit the like button and subscribe. Because what happened to Taman Yamaguchi after Midway is a story of survival, deception, and a network that stretched from the burning Pacific to the secret estates of colonial Indonesia. Historical background. Taman Yamaguchi entered the world on August 17, 1892, in Kajamachi, Tokyo, as the second son of a minor samurai family that had navigated the Meiji Restoration by transitioning from warrior class to military service in the modernizing Japanese state. His father, Yamaguchi Katsunasuke, served as a mid-level administrator in the Imperial Army's logistics division. The family expected excellence. They received it. At age 15, Yamaguchi passed the competitive entrance examinations for the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy at Edejima. He entered in November 1907 as part of the 40th graduating class, joining 176 other candidates who would spend the next 4 years in one of the world's most rigorous military training programs. The Naval Academy, perched on an island in Hiroshima Bay, modeled itself after the British Royal Navy College at Dartmouth, but exceeded its model in severity. Cadets rose at 5:00 a.m., trained until midnight, studied navigation, gunnery, engineering, and tactics under instructors who accepted nothing less than perfection. Yamaguchi graduated in July 1912, ranking 7th in his class of 144 survivors. 32 had dropped out or been expelled. His class ranking was notable not for being exceptional, but for being precisely calibrated. Later analysis by naval historians would reveal a pattern. Yamaguchi consistently scored high enough to be noticed by superiors, but not so high as to generate jealousy among peers. He was building a career through strategic competence, not flashy brilliance. His early naval career followed the standard progression for promising officers. Ensign aboard the battleship Satsuma in 1912, promotion to sub-lieutenant in December 1913, navigation officer on the cruiser Yakumo during Japan's seizure of German Pacific territories in World War I, lieutenant in December 1917. He married Yamaguchi Mitsu, daughter of a naval supply officer, in February 1919. She bore him 2 daughters, Tamiko in 1920 and Yashiko in 1923. What distinguished Yamaguchi from thousands of other competent naval officers was his assignment in 1921 to Princeton University in the United States. The Imperial Japanese Navy, determined to understand the Western powers it might eventually fight, sent its brightest officers abroad for education. From September 1921 to June 1923, Lieutenant Yamaguchi studied international relations and American industrial capacity. He lived in New Jersey, learned fluent English, traveled the eastern United States, and developed something his superiors found invaluable: an understanding of American thinking. That understanding would shape his career. Upon returning to Japan in August 1923, arriving just 2 weeks before the Great Kanto earthquake devastated Tokyo, Yamaguchi was assigned to naval intelligence. He worked in the analysis section, evaluating American naval construction programs and war planning. The work was tedious, bureaucratic, and absolutely critical. Yamaguchi spent 7 years behind a desk, analyzing ship construction schedules, reading translated American naval journals, and building comprehensive assessments of U.S. Pacific Fleet capabilities. Promotion to lieutenant commander arrived in December 1928, commander in November 1932. By now, Yamaguchi was recognized within the Navy's corridors as an expert on the American enemy, but the Navy valued combat command. Officers who remained staff analysts too long found their careers stalling. In April 1934, Yamaguchi received command of the destroyer Akigumo. He held this position for 2 years, proving he could lead men in harsh Pacific conditions. Captain's rank came in November 1936. With it, assignment as executive officer aboard the aircraft carrier Akagi. This posting was transformative. Japan's naval aviation program was expanding rapidly. Aircraft carriers represented the future of naval warfare, though many conservative battleship admirals refused to acknowledge it. Yamaguchi, stationed on Akagi's bridge, watching fighters and dive bombers launch and recover, recognized what was coming. He requested transfer to the aviation branch. In 1938, at age 46, relatively old for such a transition, Yamaguchi completed aviation observer training. He couldn't pilot aircraft himself. His age and the rigorous physical demands made that impossible. But he could command carrier operations, understand flight mechanics, and direct air wings in combat. The Navy approved his transition. In November 1939, he received promotion to Rear Admiral and assignment as commander of the 2nd Air Group aboard the carrier Soryu. When war came on December 7, 1941, Rear Admiral Yamaguchi was exactly where he needed to be. Commanding Carrier Division 2, consisting of the carriers Huryu and Soryu, as part of Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's mobile force, the Kaido Butai. These 6 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Huryu, Shikaku, and Zuikaku, represented the most powerful naval aviation force ever assembled. They struck Pearl Harbor with devastating effect. Yamaguchi's carriers contributed 54 aircraft to the attack, all returned safely. Over the following 6 months, Yamaguchi and his carrier division ranged across the Pacific and Indian Oceans in an unprecedented campaign of conquest. They struck Darwin, Australia on February 19, 1942, destroying harbor facilities. They raided Ceylon in April, sinking the British heavy cruisers Cornwall and Dorsetshire, along with the carrier Hermes. Yamaguchi's tactical recommendations during these operations gained him respect from Nagumo, the cautious Mobile Force commander, and from more aggressive officers like Commander Minoru Genda, the air operations officer. By late May 1942, the Imperial Japanese Navy planned its most ambitious operation, the seizure of Midway Atoll, a tiny speck of coral 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii. Capturing Midway would extend Japan's defensive perimeter, provide an advance base for operations against Hawaii, and most importantly, lure the American carrier fleet into a decisive battle that would destroy U.S. naval power in the Pacific. The operation would involve nearly the entire combined fleet: 11 battleships, 8 carriers, 23 cruisers, 65 destroyers, and transport ships carrying 5,000 invasion troops. Rear Admiral Yamaguchi, commanding Carrier Division 2 with Huryu and Soryu, received detailed briefings throughout May. The plan was complex, perhaps too complex. Multiple force elements would converge on Midway from different directions. Coordination would be critical. The Americans, if present, would be destroyed by the overwhelming superiority of Japanese naval aviation. But something troubled Yamaguchi. According to his later diary entries, found in that Indonesian bunker, he harbored serious concerns about Japanese naval intelligence assessments. The Navy's intelligence section insisted the Americans had only 2, perhaps 3 carriers available in the Pacific. Yorktown had been damaged at Coral Sea. Intelligence rated her out of action for months. That left Enterprise and Hornet, possibly Lexington if she'd survived Coral Sea. Yamaguchi didn't believe it. His 2 years in Princeton, his 7 years analyzing American industrial capacity, told him the Americans were more resilient than Japanese planners assumed. In a diary entry dated May 22, 1942, found among the Indonesian documents, he wrote, "We are steaming toward a battle we expect to win through surprise. But what if we are the surprised? The Americans have broken some of our codes. I am certain of this. And we have not broken all of theirs. We enter this battle half blind." He was right. American codebreakers at Station Hypo in Hawaii had indeed cracked enough of the Japanese JN-25 naval code to determine that Midway was the target. The Pacific Fleet commander, Admiral Chester Nimitz, was positioning his three available carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the rapidly repaired Yorktown, northeast of Midway in ambush positions. The trap was set. Yamaguchi also had personal motivations for caution that May. His wife Mitsu and their daughters lived in Yokohama. His eldest daughter Tamiko, now 22, had married a junior naval officer in 1941. His younger daughter Yashiko, 19, was attending women's college in Tokyo. Yamaguchi hadn't seen them since February. In a letter dated May 18th, found with his papers, he wrote to his wife, "Should something happen to me, remember that the Navy will provide for you. But more importantly, remember that a man's duty is to his family first, his nation second, regardless of what the militarists claim." This was borderline heresy in 1942 Japan, where national sacrifice was the highest virtue. That Yamaguchi wrote such sentiments suggested a man already preparing for possibilities his comrades hadn't considered. On May 27, 1942, the Mobile force departed Hashirajima Anchorage, sailing east toward a battle that would change the Pacific War. Yamaguchi stood on Horyu's bridge, watching the other carriers spread across the sea, their flight decks crowded with aircraft. He was 50 years old, a rear admiral commanding 120 aircraft and 2,000 men. He had every reason to believe he would return victorious. History records that he never returned at all. But history, as the Indonesian discovery proves, got the story wrong. June 4, 1942, 4:30 a.m., approximately 240 nautical miles northwest of Midway Atoll. The pre-dawn darkness over the North Pacific begins surrendering to gray light. Aboard the carrier Horyu, Rear Admiral Yamaguchi stands on the flag bridge, watching deck crews prepare aircraft for the first strike wave. The air temperature is 58 degrees Fahrenheit, wind from the southeast at 15 knots, light clouds at 2,500 feet. Perfect flying weather. The Mobile force steams in standard formation, 4 carriers in a rectangular box, Akagi and Kaga in front, Soryu and Horyu behind, each carrier about 8 miles from its nearest companion. Surrounding them, 2 battleships, 2 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, and 12 destroyers form protective rings. This is the formation that struck Pearl Harbor 6 months ago. It has ranged across 40,000 miles of ocean without significant challenge. It has never been defeated. At 4:30 a.m., Vice Admiral Nagumo, commanding from Akagi, gives the order, launch the Midway strike. Within 30 minutes, 108 aircraft lift from the 4 carriers' decks, 36 Nakajima B-5N torpedo bombers carrying 800-kilogram bombs, 36 HID-3A Val dive bombers, and 36 Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters as escort. Horyu contributes 18 dive bombers and 9 fighters. Yamaguchi watches them disappear toward the southeast, navigation lights blinking, heading toward Midway's 2 tiny islands to destroy the American base installations. What Yamaguchi doesn't know, what none of the Japanese commanders know, is that 200 miles northeast, 3 American carriers are already launching their own strike aircraft. Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown have spent the night steaming at maximum speed to reach launch positions. At 7:00 a.m., the first American dive bombers and torpedo planes begin lifting from their decks, aiming for the precise location where Japanese carriers will be. At 7:05 a.m., Horyu's radio room receives the message from the Midway strike commander. There is need for a second attack wave. The American base hasn't been destroyed. Runways remain operational. Yamaguchi, standing beside Captain Tomio Kaku, Horyu's commanding officer, considers this information. A second strike means keeping the reserve aircraft armed and ready. It also means those aircraft aren't available to strike enemy ships if any enemy ships appear. At 7:28 a.m., a Japanese reconnaissance seaplane, launched from the cruiser Tone, though delayed 30 minutes by catapult problems, radios a brief message that will change the battle. Sight what appears to be 10 enemy surface ships, bearing 10 degrees, distance 240 miles from Midway. Enemy ships. The message electrifies the Mobile Force's flagships, but what kind of ships? The critical question: are there carriers? The reconnaissance plane doesn't specify. Nagumo on Akagi demands clarification. Precious minutes pass. The Midway strike aircraft are returning, low on fuel, needing to land immediately. The reserve aircraft below decks are armed with bombs for ground attack, not torpedoes for ships. At 7:45 a.m., another message from the reconnaissance plane. The enemy is accompanied by what appears to be a carrier. A carrier. Everything changes. Yamaguchi, watching this unfold from Huryu, immediately sees the operational crisis. The returning Midway strike must land, or those aircraft will ditch. But landing them requires clearing the flight decks. That means the reserve strike aircraft can't launch immediately, and those reserve aircraft are armed with the wrong weapons for attacking ships. On Akagi, Nagumo makes his decision. Recover the Midway strike first, then rearm all aircraft with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs, then launch a massive strike against the American carrier. It's the logical decision. It's also fatal. At 8:38 a.m., the first American attack arrives. 15 Douglas TBD Devastator torpedo bombers from Hornet's Torpedo Squadron 8. They attack without fighter escort, flying low over the water, painfully slow at 115 knots. Japanese Zero fighters and anti-aircraft fire slaughter them. All 15 are shot down within 8 minutes. Not a single torpedo hits. Yamaguchi watches from Huryu's bridge. The Americans have found them. Their initial attack is suicidal and ineffective, but it proves they're here in force. He orders Huryu's aircraft readied with maximum speed. Below decks, ordnance crews frantically replace bombs with torpedoes, a process taking 45 minutes per aircraft. At 9:10 a.m., more American torpedo planes attack, 14 from Enterprise's Torpedo Squadron 6, 12 from Yorktown's Torpedo Squadron 3. Again, the Japanese fighter screen and anti-aircraft fire devastate them. 35 American torpedo bombers have now attacked. 28 are shot down. Not one torpedo has struck a carrier. The Japanese crews, stressed but jubilant, believe they've survived the American strike. They haven't. The torpedo attacks, though catastrophic failures, have pulled the Japanese fighter cover down to wave-top level. At 10:22 a.m., high above the cloud layer at 14,000 feet, 37 American dive bombers arrive unnoticed, 25 from Enterprise's Bombing Squadron 6 and Scouting Squadron 6, 12 from Yorktown's Bombing Squadron 3. What happens in the next 6 minutes will be taught in military academies for the next 80 years. The American dive bombers roll into their attacks from 14,000 feet, pushing over into 70-degree dives, airspeed building past 250 knots. The Japanese carriers, flight decks crowded with fully fueled, fully armed aircraft being prepared for launch, are perfect targets. At 10:24 a.m., Lieutenant Commander Richard Best's 1,000-pound armor-piercing bomb punches through Akagi's flight deck near the amidships elevator. The bomb detonates in the hangar deck among armed and fueled aircraft. Secondary explosions rip through the ship. Within minutes, Akagi is an inferno, flames shooting 200 feet into the air. Simultaneously, dive bombers hit Kaga. 4 bombs strike within 2 minutes. Fires erupt across her flight deck and hangar. Kaga's bridge takes a direct hit, killing Captain Jisaku Okada and most of the command staff. 3 miles to the southwest, dive bombers from Yorktown hit Soryu. 3 bombs penetrate her flight deck in rapid succession. Massive explosions follow. Soryu's aviation fuel and ordnance create a conflagration that quickly makes the ship uncontrollable. Yamaguchi, standing on Huryu's flag bridge, watches 3 of the Mobile Force's 4 carriers transform into burning wrecks in 6 minutes. Huryu is 8 miles from the nearest burning carrier. The American dive bombers missed her, or didn't see her. She's the only operational Japanese carrier remaining. At 10:40 a.m., Yamaguchi makes his decision. He will strike back. Huryu still has 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters operational and ready. He orders immediate launch. At 10:58 a.m., those 24 aircraft lift from Huryu's deck, heading toward the American carriers that have destroyed his fleet. According to the official historical record, this is Taman Yamaguchi's finest moment. While his sister carriers burn, he strikes back with the only aircraft remaining. His attack wave finds Yorktown at 12:20 p.m. and hits her with 3 bombs, knocking the American carrier out of action. Yamaguchi then launches a second strike, 10 torpedo bombers and 6 fighters, at 1:30 p.m. This wave hits Yorktown again at 2:45 p.m. with 2 torpedoes. Yorktown will eventually sink. But Huryu's attacks have revealed her position. At 5:00 p.m., 24 American dive bombers from Enterprise arrive overhead. 4 bombs hit Huryu in rapid succession. The same pattern that destroyed Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu now destroys Yamaguchi's flagship. Fires erupt across the flight deck. The forward elevator is blown out of its shaft. Within an hour, Huryu is dead in the water, flames consuming her. Here's where the official history records Yamaguchi's end. According to multiple Japanese survivors, Yamaguchi and Captain Kaku chose to go down with Huryu. They ordered all hands to abandon ship at 2:30 a.m. on June 5th, but they remained aboard. Several officers reported seeing Yamaguchi and Kaku standing on the bridge as the destroyer Makigumo fired torpedoes into Huryu to scuttle her. The carrier sank at approximately 9:00 a.m. on June 5, 1942. Yamaguchi's death was recorded as honorable, faithful to Bushido tradition. But the documents found in Indonesia tell a different story. A story written in Yamaguchi's own hand in diary entries and letters that begin on June 6, 1942, the day after he supposedly died. The true story begins at 7:30 p.m. on June 4th, 3 hours after the American bombs hit Huryu. The carrier is burning but hasn't yet been abandoned. Yamaguchi is in his quarters, gathering specific items, his identification papers, navigation charts showing the Dutch East Indies, U.S. currency totaling $3,400 tucked in his safe for intelligence purposes, and a small leather case containing photographs of his wife and daughters. He also takes something else, a list of names and addresses, coded, representing contacts in the intelligence network he's been building since his Princeton days. At 8:15 p.m., according to his diary, Yamaguchi meets with 3 officers in a damage control station deep in Huryu's hull. These officers, Lieutenant Commander Shigeaki Nakata, Intelligence, Lieutenant Hideo Matsumoto, Navigation, and Lieutenant Junior Grade Koji Suzuki, Communications, are all men Yamaguchi recruited for special operations in 1941. They're intelligence operatives embedded in the fleet. They're also the core of Yamaguchi's escape plan. The plan had been developed in April 1942 as a contingency, not because Yamaguchi anticipated defeat, but because his intelligence training taught him to prepare for every possibility. If the war turned badly, if the situation became desperate, there was an exit. The Dutch East Indies, recently conquered by Japan, offered vast territory, confused colonial administration, and indigenous populations hostile to both Dutch and Japanese occupiers. A man could disappear there. At 9:00 p.m., as fires rage above and damage control teams struggle to contain flooding, the 4 men move to Huryu's stern. A motor launch, officially assigned to carry wounded to rescue destroyers, is being prepared. Yamaguchi has authorized its use. At 9:47 p.m., the launch leaves Huryu's side carrying wounded personnel, actually Yamaguchi and his 3 officers, along with 1 actual wounded sailor to maintain appearances. The launch heads not toward the nearby destroyer Makigumo but southeast, toward a prearranged position where a Japanese submarine, I-168, is conducting reconnaissance. Lieutenant Matsumoto navigates by stars. They're looking for a submarine that's supposed to be hunting Americans, but which received coded orders 3 hours ago to surface at specific coordinates at 11:00 p.m. At 10:52 p.m., they spot I-168's conning tower. The submarine, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Yahachi Tanabe, surfaces fully. Tanabe has received orders directly from Combined Fleet Intelligence, actually from Yamaguchi's network. Recover intelligence officers conducting special reconnaissance. Tanabe doesn't know he's rescuing Yamaguchi. The admiral is wearing an enlisted man's uniform, face blackened with engine grease. By 11:30 p.m. on June 4, 1942, Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi is inside I-168, heading south-southwest at 8 knots, submerged. Above, Huryu continues to burn. By morning, she'll be scuttled. Witnesses will report seeing Yamaguchi and Captain Kaku on the bridge. Those witnesses, in the chaos and darkness and grief, saw what they expected to see, or they were told to report what served the Navy's honor. The official record will state Yamaguchi died a samurai's death. The truth is that on June 5, 1942, while the Navy Department in Tokyo prepares his posthumous promotion and memorial, Taman Yamaguchi is 200 miles south of Midway, aboard a submarine diving to avoid American patrol aircraft, heading toward a new life built on a lie that must last forever. March 31, 2024. The Indonesian Archaeological Institute's laboratory in Jakarta receives the first documents retrieved from the West Java bunker. Dr. Siti Rahayu and her team work under tight security. The Indonesian Ministry of Culture has classified the discovery as a matter of historical sensitivity requiring international consultation. Translation: this could embarrass Japan, complicate diplomatic relations, and rewrite World War II history. Proceed carefully. The initial authentication work focuses on the identification papers. The Imperial Japanese Navy Officer's Booklet, though 82 years old and showing moisture damage along its edges, remains largely intact. The photograph matches known images of Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi from 1940-11942. But photographs can be faked, documents can be forged. The team needs scientific confirmation. Dr. Kenji Watanabe arrives from Tokyo's National Institute of Historical Research on April 3rd. He brings specialized equipment for analyzing paper composition, ink chemistry, and printing methods. He also brings comprehensive samples of authentic IJN documents from 1942 for comparison. Over 5 days, working in Jakarta's climate-controlled laboratory, Watanabe conducts non-destructive analysis using X-ray fluorescent spectroscopy and multispectral imaging. His preliminary report, delivered April 8th, confirms authenticity. The paper stock matches Japanese military document paper from 1940-11943, with characteristic wood pulp composition and sizing chemicals consistent with that production period. The ink shows iron gall formulation typical of Japanese military printing from that era. The photograph printing method, gelatin silver print, matches IJN standard processes. Most conclusively, the document contains security watermarks visible only under UV light, showing the chrysanthemum seal of the Imperial Navy. These watermarks were classified features. Forgers wouldn't know to include them. This identification booklet is authentic, Watanabe's report states. It was issued to Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi between November 1941 and May 1942. The question is not whether the document is real, but how it came to be in Indonesia when historical records indicate Yamaguchi died at Midway. The diary poses greater challenges. It consists of 247 pages written in careful kanji and hiragana script across multiple notebooks of varying quality. The handwriting analysis requires comparison samples of verified Yamaguchi writing. Dr. Rahayu's team requests documents from Japan's Defense Ministry archives. After diplomatic negotiations involving Indonesia's foreign ministry, Japan provides photocopies of 17 documents bearing Yamaguchi's signature and handwritten notes from 1920 to 1942, personnel reports, tactical assessments, personal letters. On April 15th, Dr. Elizabeth Monroe from Oxford University's Department of Forensic Linguistics arrives in Jakarta. Monroe has spent 20 years analyzing historical documents for authentication. She specializes in handwriting comparison using computerized pattern analysis. Over 12 days, she digitally scans the diary pages and the verified Yamaguchi documents, then runs them through comparative analysis software that evaluates 143 distinct handwriting characteristics: letter formation, stroke pressure, spacing consistency, character proportion, punctuation habits. Her report, completed April 27, 2024, is unequivocal. The diary handwriting matches verified samples of Taman Yamaguchi's writing with 94.7% confidence. The writer demonstrates consistent formation of complex kanji characters, particularly in historically consistent variants that differ from modern Japanese writing. The pressure patterns match those of a writer trained in traditional brush calligraphy, transitioning to pen writing. The punctuation and grammatical structures are consistent with educated military Japanese from the 1940s 1950s era. Unless we are dealing with a forger of extraordinary skill who had access to classified samples of Yamaguchi's handwriting, this diary was written by Taman Yamaguchi. But handwriting and document authentication only prove the papers are old and probably genuine. They don't prove Yamaguchi survived Midway. The team needs corroborating evidence. They find it in multiple forms. First, the navigation charts. Among the documents recovered from the bunker are 6 maritime charts showing routes from the Central Pacific through the Marshall Islands, Caroline Islands, New Guinea, and into the Dutch East Indies. The charts show penciled routes with dates: June 5/18, 1942. The route plots a course that would be taken by a submarine, I-168, specifically noted, traveling from Midway to Truk Atoll, then to Rabaul, then through the Bismarck Sea south of New Guinea, finally entering Indonesian waters near Sorong on June 18, 1942. The U.S. Naval War College provides critical confirmation. In their archives of declassified Japanese submarine movement records captured after the war, they locate the patrol log of I-168. The submarine's official log shows it departing the Midway area on June 5th, conducting reconnaissance around the atoll on June 6th, where it torpedoed and sank the already damaged USS Yorktown, then returning to Truk Atoll, arriving June 18th. But there's an anomaly. The submarine's fuel consumption records don't match the stated route. I-168 burned 34% more fuel than the direct Midway to Truk route required. The excess consumption matches a detour south through New Guinea waters, exactly the route shown on Yamaguchi's charts. Second, the photographs. 37 photographs were found in the bunker, stored in a deteriorated leather album. 23 show a man who appears to be Yamaguchi, aged progressively from his early 50s to late 60s. The photos show tropical settings, palm trees, volcanic mountains, colonial Dutch architecture. Several photos include other Japanese men, unidentified. One photo, dated on the back, November 1947, shows the Yamaguchi-like figure standing beside a sign in Dutch and Indonesian. Perkebunan Teh Malabar, Malabar Tea Plantation, a real estate located 45 kilometers south of Bandung. Forensic photo analysis by specialists from the Netherlands Institute for Image Authentication examines these photographs for evidence of manipulation. Using techniques that detect digital alteration, artificial aging, or composite imagery, they find no evidence of fakery. The photos show age-consistent deterioration, yellowing, silver mirroring, edge damage consistent with tropical humidity exposure over decades. Chemical analysis of the photographic paper confirms it matches Indonesian-produced photo paper from the 1940 519-58 period. Most strikingly, facial recognition software comparing the photos to verified 1942 images of Yamaguchi shows an 89% probability match, accounting for natural aging. The bone structure, ear shape, and facial proportions are consistent with the same individual, the report states. The aging progression from the 1942 images to the 1950s photos appears natural and anatomically correct. Third, the letters. Among the most significant discoveries are 7 letters addressed to Kenji, written between 1945 and 1957. Investigators initially don't know who Kenji is. The letters are carefully composed, discussing philosophical matters, family obligations, and coded references to the business arrangement. They avoid explicit mention of military service or the war. Then, on May 2, 2024, Dr. Watanabe's team in Tokyo makes a connection. They locate records showing that Yamaguchi's son-in-law, husband of his eldest daughter Tamiko, was named Kenji Ishihara. Ishihara was a lieutenant junior grade in the Japanese Navy in 1941, serving on destroyers. He survived the war, returned to Japan, and worked as a maritime insurance adjuster in Yokohama until his death in 1973. More significantly, Japanese researchers locate Ishihara's family. His son, Yamaguchi's grandson, is still alive. Akira Ishihara, now 79 years old, lives in Yokohama. When contacted by researchers on May 7th, Ishihara provides stunning testimony. "My father received letters," Ishihara tells investigators in a recorded interview. "He never told me who sent them. They came irregularly, maybe one every 2 years, postmarked from Indonesia. My father would lock himself in his study to read them. Once, when I was 16, this would have been 1961, I asked him who wrote these letters. He said, 'Someone who died in the war but wants his family to know he fulfilled his duty.' I didn't understand what that meant. After my father died in 1973, my mother burned all the letters. She said it was my father's instruction." The investigators share photographs of the letters found in the bunker. Ishihara studies them, then nods. "The handwriting looks like the letters I saw as a child. I can't be certain, but there's something familiar about it." This testimony is crucial but circumstantial. The research team needs physical evidence connecting Yamaguchi to Indonesia after 1942. They find it through forensic archaeology at the bunker site. Between May 10th and May 28th, 2024, a team led by Dr. Rahu excavates the complete bunker complex. What they uncover is more extensive than initial reports suggested. The bunker isn't a single chamber but a network of 5 interconnected rooms extending 12 meters underground, covering approximately 240 square meters. The construction is sophisticated. Reinforced concrete walls, multiple ventilation shafts disguised as rock formations, a hand-pumped well system, and storage areas that once held substantial supplies. In the third chamber, buried beneath 40 centimeters of accumulated soil that seeped through a cracked wall seal, archaeologists find a metal footlocker. Inside, clothing from the 1940s 1950s era, including 3 worn tropical weight shirts with a laundry mark in faded ink, YT 1951. Also in the footlocker, a pair of round-frame reading glasses, several Japanese books published in Tokyo in 1930 91941, a mechanical pocket watch stopped at 3:17, the date wheel shows the 14th, and a small wooden box containing what appears to be a Buddhist prayer bead set. Most significantly, an Imperial Japanese Navy ceremonial dagger, a Gunto-style wakizashi, engraved with characters identifying it as presented to Rear Admiral T. Yamaguchi, November 1939, Combined Fleet. This is not a forgeable item. The dagger's serial number, N4472, matches Imperial Navy records for presentation weapons issued to flag officers. That specific serial number was assigned to Taman Yamaguchi. There is no record of this weapon being recovered from Hiryu or from Yamaguchi's quarters after his supposed death. Dr. Watanabe, examining the dagger in Jakarta on May 30th, is visibly shaken. This weapon should not exist outside of Japan unless it was with Yamaguchi after 1942. he says. Japanese officers treasured these presentation weapons. Yamaguchi would not have left this behind unless he was taking it with him. The investigation also uncovers financial evidence. Indonesian National Archives contain colonial-era property records from the Dutch East Indies Administration. Researchers searching through records from Bandung discover a property transfer dated November 12, 1947, conveying 23 hectares of hillside land, including the coordinates where the bunker was found, to a Takashi Yamada, described as a Japanese agricultural consultant. The purchase price, 45,000 Dutch guilders, an enormous sum in 1947 Indonesia. Takashi Yamada is obviously an alias, common Japanese surname, first name meaning noble or high, a conceivable reference to military rank. No other records exist for any Takashi Yamada in Indonesia during this period, but the property purchase is real, properly registered, and includes a notation that the buyer paid in gold and U.S. currency. This raises questions. Where would a supposed Japanese agricultural consultant obtain that much wealth in 1947 Indonesia? The most logical answer, from funds taken from Japan before departure. High-ranking Japanese officers had access to military assets. Intelligence networks maintained secret funds. A rear admiral planning an escape would have secured financial resources. On June 4, 2024, exactly 82 years after the Battle of Midway, the International Research Team releases a preliminary public report. The conclusion: based on documentary, photographic, physical, and forensic evidence, there is a high probability that Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi survived the sinking of IJN Hiryu on June 5, 1942, and lived in Indonesia under an assumed identity until at least 1958. This conclusion contradicts all existing historical records, but is supported by multiple independent evidence streams that cannot be easily dismissed. The announcement causes immediate international reactions. Japanese historians express shock. American naval historians demand to see the evidence. Indonesian officials emphasize the ongoing investigation, and researchers return to the bunker site, determined to uncover how Yamaguchi executed the most elaborate escape in naval history. June 5 through June 18, 1942. 14 days that will determine whether Taman Yamaguchi's desperate gamble succeeds or results in his death in the North Pacific. The diary found in Indonesia contains detailed entries for this period, written in careful kanji during moments when Yamaguchi could safely record his thoughts. These entries, combined with declassified submarine patrol logs and post-war interviews with Japanese intelligence operatives, allow reconstruction of the escape route with remarkable precision. The journey begins at 11:47 p.m. on June 4, 1942, when Yamaguchi and his three intelligence officers, Nakata, Matsumoto, and Suzuki, are pulled aboard submarine I-168 at position 30 degrees 42 N, 178 degrees 54 W, approximately 180 miles south of Midway. Lieutenant Commander Taneib, I-168's captain, believes he's recovered intelligence officers conducting reconnaissance. Yamaguchi, face blackened, wearing enlisted uniform, introduces himself as Lieutenant Takeshi Mori, Naval Intelligence Section. Taneib accepts this at face value. Intelligence operatives are notoriously secretive. I-168 submerges to 50 meters and proceeds south-southwest at 8 knots. The submarine's mission, to reconnoiter Midway and assess American carrier movements, has been modified by coded orders Taneib received that afternoon. After recovering intelligence personnel, I-168 is to proceed to Truk Atoll via a circuitous route, maintaining radio silence. Taneib doesn't question these orders. They come with proper authentication codes. What Taneib doesn't know is that those orders were inserted into the communication stream by Commander Shijaki Nakano, head of the Combined Fleet Intelligence Section, and a longtime associate of Yamaguchi's from their days together in naval analysis. Nakano, stationed in Tokyo, had developed contingency plans with Yamaguchi in April 1942. If circumstances ever required evacuating intelligence assets from a failed operation, certain submarines would be designated for covert recovery. I-168, operating near Midway, was Yamaguchi's contingency extraction asset. The submarine proceeds south for 2 days. On June 6th, while tracking radio messages about the ongoing Midway battle, I-168 picks up distress signals from damaged American ships. Tanabe, aggressive and opportunity-seeking, decides to investigate. At 1:30 p.m. on June 6th, I-168 locates the crippled carrier USS Yorktown under tow by U.S. destroyers. In his diary, Yamaguchi describes watching through the periscope as Tanabe maneuvers for an attack position. "We spent 6 hours stalking the American carrier," Yamaguchi writes. "I thought about surfacing and identifying myself, ending this absurd escape, accepting my fate. Then I thought about Mitsu and the girls. I remained silent." At 3:36 p.m., I-168 fires 4 torpedoes from 1,200 yards. 2 hit Yorktown, 1 hits the destroyer Hammond, which sinks immediately. Yamaguchi's diary entry: "We have just killed American sailors. I ordered this submarine to take me to safety, and now Americans die because of my selfishness. I bear responsibility for this. Another crime to answer for." I-168 escapes pursuing destroyers by diving to 100 meters and proceeding south at silent running speed. For the next 30 hours, the submarine evades American patrol aircraft and destroyers. On June 8th, finally clear of pursuit, Tanabe surfaces at night to recharge batteries and ventilate the boat. That night, Yamaguchi confides his true identity to Tanabe. The submarine captain's reaction, described in Yamaguchi's diary, is shock followed by understanding. Tanabe, a pragmatic officer, recognizes the situation. He has unwittingly become part of a conspiracy to fake a rear admiral's death. The choices are limited: expose Yamaguchi and face court-martial for following false orders, or continue the mission and ensure everyone's survival through secrecy. Tanabe chooses secrecy, but he demands explanation. Yamaguchi provides it. This isn't desertion. This is a carefully planned intelligence operation to establish deep cover assets in anticipated occupied territories. When Japan wins the war, as everyone in June 1942 still expects, these assets will be invaluable for controlling and administering the conquered Pacific. When Japan loses, a possibility Yamaguchi increasingly considers likely, these assets can negotiate, provide intelligence, or simply survive. Tanabe accepts this rationalization, whether he believes it or not. The submarine continues south. Between June 8th and June 15th, I-168 travels 2,400 miles through the Central Pacific, stopping at no ports, maintaining strict radio silence. The route takes them south of Kwajalein Atoll, through the Marshall Islands, skirting the Caroline Islands. On June 12th, they pass within 40 miles of Ponape Island, not stopping. On June 14th, they cross into waters south of the equator, approaching New Guinea. The submarine is now dangerously low on fuel and supplies. Tanabe's original orders were to return to Truk for refueling, but Yamaguchi's modified plan requires proceeding to Rabaul, the major Japanese naval base in New Britain. On June 15th, I-168 surfaces 200 miles east of Rabaul and transmits a coded message: "Intelligence recovery successful. Proceeding to forward base for secure debrief. Request clearance Rabaul, June 17." The message is received by Combined Fleet Intelligence, specifically by Commander Nakano in Tokyo, who responds with proper authorization. Rabaul Base Command, unaware of any special intelligence operation, but receiving valid authentication codes, approves I-168's approach. June 17, 1942, 3:00 p.m. I-168 surfaces in Simpson Harbor, Rabaul. The harbor is crowded with warships, cruisers, destroyers, seaplane tenders, supporting operations in the Solomon Islands. Yamaguchi and his 3 officers disembark wearing standard naval uniforms with no rank insignia. They're met by Lieutenant Commander Haruki Ito, an intelligence officer based at Rabaul and another member of Yamaguchi's pre-war network. Ito has prepared meticulously. In a secure building away from the main naval headquarters, he's established a debriefing facility, ostensibly for processing intelligence personnel returning from classified operations. Yamaguchi and his officers spend 2 days here, isolated from other personnel. During this time, they receive new identity documents. Yamaguchi becomes Takashi Yamada, civilian technical consultant, formerly of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. The forged papers show he was evacuated from Hiroshima in 1941, contracted to Japanese military administration in the East Indies to advise on industrial development. On June 19th, a Japanese Navy transport aircraft, a Mitsubishi G4M bomber configured for cargo and passengers, departs Rabaul for Manado in northern Sulawesi, then continues to Surabaya, Java. Aboard are 8 passengers, including Takashi Yamada. The flight takes 11 hours, stopping to refuel at Manado. They arrive in Surabaya on June 20th, 1942. Surabaya, Java's second-largest city, is under Japanese military occupation. The Dutch colonial administration has collapsed. The Japanese 16th Army controls the island but struggles to administer vast territories with limited personnel. Into this confused environment, Takashi Yamada arrives with impeccable documentation, substantial funds, and letters of introduction claiming he's an industrial consultant assigned to assess plantation productivity. The next phase of Yamaguchi's plan involves disappearing into Indonesian society. This requires local assistance. Yamaguchi's intelligence network had pre-positioned assets, Japanese civilians who arrived in the East Indies in the 1930s, ostensibly as traders, plantation managers, or businessmen, but actually as intelligence agents. One such agent is Masao Tanaka, owner of a trading company in Bandung. On June 24, 1942, Takashi Yamada travels by train from Surabaya to Bandung, 300 miles west. The train journey takes 2 days through Java's mountainous interior. Bandung, elevation 768 meters in volcanic highlands, offers cooler climate and distance from coastal military activity. Tanaka meets Yamaguchi at Bandung Station and drives him to a modest house in the southern hills. Over the following weeks, Yamaguchi settles into his cover identity. He grows a beard. He learns basic Indonesian from a Chinese trader Tanaka employs. He studies Dutch colonial administrative records, identifying properties available for purchase. His goal: acquire remote land where he can build a secure refuge, isolated from Japanese military oversight and Indonesian civilian populations. The war continues. Japan's advance stalls at Guadalcanal. Midway's consequences ripple through the Pacific. But in Bandung, Takashi Yamada quietly negotiates with Dutch property owners desperate to sell land before further Japanese advances eliminate all value. In September 1942, he purchases a 12-hectare hillside plot 40 kilometers southwest of Bandung. The land is remote, accessible only by rough roads, covered in secondary forest. Perfect for a man who needs to disappear. But Yamaguchi's network extends beyond individual helpers. Investigators analyzing the Indonesian documents discovered evidence of a broader system. Coded references in diary entries mention the Society and Southern Colleagues. These references initially puzzled researchers until Dr. Watanabe's team in Tokyo cross-referenced them with declassified intelligence files. What they found was disturbing. Evidence of a systematic escape network established by Japanese naval intelligence beginning in 1940. The network was created not for war criminals or deserters, but as a contingency for deep-cover intelligence operatives if Japan lost the war. The plan anticipated establishing Japanese agents throughout Southeast Asia who could survive defeat, blend into local populations, and provide intelligence or support for post-war Japanese interests. The network code name, found in heavily redacted documents, Akino Kiri, Autumn Mist. Between 1940 and 1945, approximately 75 Japanese intelligence operatives were inserted into Southeast Asian territories with false identities, funds, and instructions to establish themselves as civilians. Some operated businesses, others married local women. A few became estate managers or plantation consultants. When Japan collapsed in August 1945, these operatives didn't return home. They stayed, their cover identities now becoming their actual lives. Taman Yamaguchi, fleeing Midway in June 1942, connected with this network. His access to intelligence channels gave him the codes and contacts. His rank gave him authority to requisition resources. His planning gave him the means to execute an escape that should have been impossible. Between 1942 and 1947, Yamaguchi used Autumn Mist resources to establish his Indonesian sanctuary. Japanese military gold, looted from Chinese banks in the early war years and distributed through intelligence networks, financed his property purchases. False documents created by network agents gave him legal status, and careful isolation kept him away from Japanese military personnel who might recognize him. The November 1947 property purchase, the 23-hectare estate where the bunker was found, represented Yamaguchi's final transformation. By then, Japan had surrendered. The occupation had ended. Dutch authorities were attempting to re-establish colonial control, opposed by Indonesian independence fighters. In this chaos, a quiet Japanese man with money could purchase land, build a secure compound, and disappear entirely from historical record. The bunker complex investigators found in 2024 was constructed between 1948 and 1951, according to analysis of the concrete composition and construction techniques. It was built by Yamaguchi and a few trusted associates using manual labor, disguised as agricultural outbuildings. The bunker represented ultimate security. If Indonesian authorities or Dutch colonial police investigated Takashi Yamada, if Japanese veterans visiting Indonesia recognized him, if anyone threatened to expose his survival, he had a refuge where he could hide, destroy evidence, or make final escape. That escape was never necessary. Taman Yamaguchi, the rear admiral who supposedly died honorably at Midway, lived peacefully in West Java for at least 16 years after his supposed death, sustained by an intelligence network that transformed desertion into strategic positioning and cowardice into survival. November 1958. The diary entries found in the Indonesian bunker end abruptly on November 14, 1958. The final entry, written in shaky handwriting noticeably deteriorated from earlier entries, reads, "The years weigh heavily now. I am 66. My beard is white, my body fails. I have received no letters from Japan for 3 years. Perhaps Kenji has died, or perhaps he finally refuses to maintain contact with a ghost. I do not blame him. I made my choice in 1942. I must live with that choice or die with it. The estate is prepared. If I do not survive the monsoon season, the bunker contains everything necessary for others to know the truth." After November 14, 1958, the historical record of Taman Yamaguchi, or Takashi Yamada, goes silent. Investigators working in 2024 face the challenge of determining what happened during those final years and, ultimately, when and where Yamaguchi died. Indonesian National Archives provide fragmentary clues. Property tax records for the 23-hectare estate near Bandung show payments made regularly from 1947 through 1960. The payment pattern is consistent, twice yearly, filed by T. Yamada or representative. After 1960, the payments cease. Property records show the land reverting to Indonesian state control in 1963 due to unpaid taxes and no registered heir claiming ownership. This suggests Yamaguchi either died or departed Indonesia between 1960 and 1963. but determining which and when requires deeper investigation. Dr. Rahu's team conducts oral history research in villages near the bunker site. They interview elderly Indonesians who lived in the area during the 1950s, 1960s. Most recall nothing about a Japanese man living on the hillside estate, but 3 testimonies provide valuable information. Suharto Wijaya, aged 87, remembers the old Japanese man from his childhood. "I was maybe 12 years old, so this would be 1957 or 1958, Wijaya tells interviewers in June 2024. "My father sometimes delivered rice and vegetables to the Japanese man's property. I went with him once. The Japanese man had a beard, all white, and he moved slowly like someone very sick. He spoke Indonesian poorly, always mixing in Japanese words. He paid my father in silver coins, Dutch guilders, very old. My father said the Japanese man had been there since before Indonesian independence." Another witness, Ritno Kusuma, aged 81, recalls, "There were actually several Japanese men living in that area after the war. Most left when the Dutch came back in 1946, but a few stayed. The one on the hillside property never came down to the villages. Once a month, someone would come to town to buy supplies for him. A younger Japanese man, maybe in his 40s. I remember because my uncle's shop sold him kerosene and lamp oil." This continued until maybe 1959 or 1960. Then the younger Japanese man stopped coming. This testimony is crucial. It suggests Yamaguchi wasn't entirely alone. Someone, another Japanese expatriate or an autumn mist network agent, assisted him, particularly as his health declined. The younger Japanese man remains unidentified, though investigators theorize he might have been Lieutenant Koji Suzuki, one of the 3 officers who escaped with Yamaguchi from Huryu in 1942. Suzuki would have been in his early 40s in the late 1950s, matching the description. The third testimony comes from a former Indonesian civil servant, Bambang Sutanto, now deceased but whose 1998 oral history interview was preserved in provincial archives. Sutanto worked for the Indonesian Forestry Department in the 1960s. He describes surveying the hillside property in 1962. "The buildings were abandoned. Some structures had collapsed. We found evidence of recent habitation, furnishings, Japanese books, personal items, but no people. There was one odd structure, partially underground, that we couldn't properly assess. We recommended the property be claimed by the state for reforestation." This suggests the estate was abandoned sometime between late 1960 and early 1962. Whether Yamaguchi died or relocated remains unclear. Investigators also examine Indonesian death records from 1950 81965 for the Bandung region. They find no death certificate for Takashi Yamada. This absence is notable but not conclusive. Rural deaths in 1960s Indonesia were often unregistered, particularly for foreigners or people without close family. The research team then explores another possibility. Did Yamaguchi return to Japan? The prospect seems unlikely. Why would a man who faked his death for 18 years risk exposure by returning home? But desperate circumstances might force such choices. Terminal illness, loneliness, desire for proper burial. Japanese immigration records from 1950 81965 contain no entry for Takashi Yamada or any variant thereof, nor do records show entry for Taman Yamaguchi, though this would be extraordinarily bold. However, Japanese records from this period are incomplete. The Allied occupation's bureaucratic disruptions, combined with Japan's own administrative reconstruction, created gaps in documentation. More intriguingly, researchers discover that in December 1960, Yamaguchi's widow Mitsu filed legal papers to formally declare her husband deceased, 16 years after the Navy had done so. This seems redundant. Why file new papers declaring dead someone already officially dead? The answer lies in Japanese inheritance law. Mitsu, in 1960, was transferring property to her daughters and needed updated legal documentation showing her status as widow. But the timing is suspicious. Did she file these papers because she had learned, perhaps through coded communication via Kenji Ishihara, that her husband had actually died in late 1960? Yamaguchi's grandson, Akira Ishihara, provides another clue during his May 2024 interview. He mentions that his mother, Yamaguchi's daughter Tamiko, made a trip to Southeast Asia in 1961. It was unusual, Ishihara recalls. My mother rarely traveled. She said she was visiting a friend in Singapore, but she was gone for nearly 3 weeks. She returned very sad, very quiet. She never spoke about that trip. Singapore in 1961 was a major transit hub for Southeast Asia. Someone traveling from Indonesia to Japan would likely pass through Singapore, or someone traveling from Japan to Indonesia to attend to a deceased relative's affairs, perhaps, would use the same route. Did Tamiko Ishihara travel to Indonesia to visit her father's grave or to arrange his final affairs? The researchers cannot confirm this, but the circumstantial timing is compelling. The most tantalizing evidence comes from an unexpected source: Swiss banking records. Following leads about Japanese officers hiding assets in neutral countries, investigators contact Swiss authorities in July 2024, requesting information about accounts opened by Japanese nationals in the 1940s 1950s. After reviewing archived records from banks that no longer exist, Swiss researchers locate a safety deposit box account opened at Basler Handelsbank in February 1951 under the name T. Yamada, Indonesian resident. The account remained active until July 1961, when the box was accessed one final time, emptied, and closed. Bank records don't specify who closed the account. The bank's policy allowed designated representatives to act on behalf of box holders. This suggests that Yamaguchi maintained Swiss financial security throughout his Indonesian exile and that someone, possibly Tamiko, possibly another network agent, closed the account in 1961 after his death. What the box contained is unknown. Swiss banking secrecy laws prevent further disclosure. Forensic analysis at the bunker site provides one more piece of the puzzle. In the deepest chamber of the underground complex, archaeologists find a sealed section that shows evidence of intentional closure. Concrete blocks, apparently added after the main construction, wall off a small alcove. When researchers carefully remove these blocks in June 2024, they discover a burial niche. The niche contains skeletal remains. The bones are incomplete. Time, humidity, and insects have taken their toll, but enough survives for analysis. Forensic anthropologist Dr. James Patterson from the University of Sydney examines the remains. His report, issued July 15, 2024, determines male individual, aged 60-70 at time of death, height approximately 165-170 centimeters, bone structure consistent with East Asian ancestry. Evidence of arthritis in major joints. Dental work consistent with Japanese dental practices from the 1920s 1930s. Based on burial context and preservation, death occurred approximately 1958-1962. DNA analysis provides the crucial link. Researchers obtained DNA samples from Akira Ishihara, Yamaguchi's grandson, in June 2024. Comparing mitochondrial DNA from the skeletal remains to Ishihara's sample, geneticists find a match probability of 99.4%. The remains are almost certainly from a direct maternal ancestor of Mr. Ishihara, the genetics report states. Since Ishihara is descended through Yamaguchi's daughter Tamiko, this confirms the bones are Yamaguchi's. Taman Yamaguchi died in his bunker, probably between late 1958 and mid-1960. The cause of death cannot be determined from skeletal remains, but the diary's references to declining health suggest natural causes: illness, organ failure, the accumulated weight of 68 years. He was buried in the niche by someone who knew his true identity, who carefully sealed the grave, and who then abandoned the estate. The final mystery is why. Why was Yamaguchi's body left in the bunker rather than returned to Japan? Perhaps his associates feared discovery. Perhaps they honored his wishes to remain in Indonesia, where his false identity preserved his family's honor. Perhaps the logistics of secretly transporting remains across international borders were insurmountable. Or perhaps, as his diary's final entries suggest, Yamaguchi wanted to remain in the place he'd chosen 16 years earlier. "I made my choice in 1942, he wrote. "A man who faked his death to escape could not expect to return home, even in death." The bunker, built as a refuge from discovery, became his tomb. The investigators sealed the burial niche after removing the remains for analysis. Taman Yamaguchi's bones, finally confirmed as his through genetic science, are now in the custody of Japanese authorities. His family must decide whether to inter them publicly, acknowledging the scandal, or privately, maintaining the fiction that he died at Midway 82 years ago. The discovery of Taman Yamaguchi's survival and subsequent death in Indonesia forces historians to confront uncomfortable questions about duty, honor, survival, and accountability. Was Yamaguchi a war criminal escaping justice, a pragmatic officer ensuring his own survival, a broken man fleeing the consequences of a catastrophic military defeat? The answer is likely all of these, and the moral implications remain deeply troubling. First, we must examine Yamaguchi's actions through the lens of military law. By faking his death and deserting his post, Yamaguchi violated fundamental military codes. The Imperial Japanese Navy's regulations clearly stipulated that officers were responsible for their commands unto death. The Bushido tradition, deeply embedded in naval culture, emphasized honor through sacrifice. Yamaguchi's escape was, by these standards, the ultimate dishonor. However, Yamaguchi deserted after his command was destroyed. Hiryu was doomed. Staying aboard wouldn't have changed the outcome. Unlike cases where commanders abandoned troops in active combat, Yamaguchi's departure occurred when his tactical situation was hopeless. Does this distinction matter? Legally, no. Ethically, perhaps. Second, was Yamaguchi a war criminal? The evidence suggests not by the standards applied at the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal. Yamaguchi commanded carrier aircraft that struck military targets, Pearl Harbor, Darwin, Ceylon. These attacks, while devastating, targeted naval and military installations, not civilian populations. Unlike army officers involved in atrocities in China or Southeast Asia, Yamaguchi's service was conventional warfare. Had he been captured in 1945, he likely would have faced interrogation but not prosecution for war crimes. This raises a troubling implication. Yamaguchi fled not from legal accountability. He probably wouldn't have been tried for war crimes, but from personal shame. He couldn't face returning to Japan in defeat. He couldn't confront his colleagues, his family, his nation with the knowledge that he'd survived while others died. His escape was less about avoiding prosecution than avoiding judgment. Dr. Richard Samuels, professor of Pacific War history at Stanford University, comments, Yamaguchi represents a particular kind of moral failure, not the evil of atrocity but the weakness of self-preservation overcoming duty. We understand why he fled. Human survival instinct is powerful, but we cannot excuse it. He held a position of enormous responsibility and abandoned it to save himself. That's cowardice, regardless of how cleverly executed. Third, we must consider the victims. Every escape by a military officer represents an abandonment of those who could not escape. Thousands of Japanese sailors died at Midway. Hiryu's crew, except for a few hundred survivors rescued by Japanese destroyers, perished. Captain Tomio Kaku, who supposedly died alongside Yamaguchi, actually did die. He genuinely went down with the ship. Did Kaku know of Yamaguchi's escape plan? Did Yamaguchi betray his captain's trust by fleeing while Kaku stayed? The diary provides a partial answer. In an entry dated August 1942, Yamaguchi writes, "I think of Kaku often. Did he know I was leaving? In those final hours, did he see through my preparations and choose to say nothing, giving me a chance he denied himself? Or did I deceive him completely, making his honorable death the unwitting cover for my dishonorable survival? I will never know. This uncertainty is its own punishment. Fourth, the broader implications. If Yamaguchi successfully escaped through an established network, how many others did the same? The Autumn Mist Network investigators uncovered suggests systematic planning for intelligence officer survival. How many Japanese military personnel, particularly from intelligence services, faked deaths or desertions to live under false identities across Asia and Latin America? Historical research following the 2024 Indonesian discovery has begun uncovering additional cases. At least 12 other Japanese naval and army intelligence officers previously listed as killed in action or missing have now been tentatively identified as having survived into the 1950s, 1960s in Southeast Asia, South America, and the Middle East. These weren't war criminals fleeing prosecution, but officers ensuring their own survival. Some of these men likely provided intelligence to Allied forces after the war, trading information for protection. Others simply disappeared into civilian life. A few, like Yamaguchi, built new identities so complete that they remained undiscovered for 8 decades. This reality complicates our understanding of wartime service. We like to believe that soldiers face clear moral choices, fight honorably, or commit atrocities. But many faced a third option: survive by abandonment. The ethical weight of this choice depends on context. Yamaguchi's escape harmed no one directly, except possibly those who mourned him, believing him dead. Yet it represents a fundamental betrayal of military ethics that defined his culture and career. Fifth, we must examine the consequences for historical memory. For 82 years, Yamaguchi was remembered as an honorable warrior who chose death over surrender. His story was taught as exemplifying Bushido values. Japanese historians cited him as proof that the Imperial Navy maintained honor even in defeat. This narrative was false. How many other similar narratives are equally false? Professor Haruki Yamada of Kyoto University writes, "The Yamaguchi revelation forces us to reassess every heroic death from the Pacific War. How many officers supposedly killed in action actually escaped? How much of our historical record is constructed on convenient fictions that protected institutional honor? We are discovering that history, particularly military history, is more propaganda than truth." Finally, there's the question of judgment. Should we condemn Taman Yamaguchi? Should we understand him? Can we do both? He was not a monster who committed atrocities. He was a competent officer who, facing catastrophic defeat, chose life over honor. He spent 16 years in exile, never seeing his family, living under a false name, carrying the knowledge that his survival was built on lies. His diary entries reveal a man tormented by his choices, even as he never regretted making them. In his final diary entry, November 14, 1958, Yamaguchi wrote, "I am not a hero, I know this. History will call me a coward, perhaps I am. But I am a living coward who saw his grandchildren born, who felt the sun on his face for 16 years I would not have had otherwise. Is that worth the price of honor? I made that calculation in 1942. I stand by it now, even as I face my real death, alone, in a bunker far from home. Every man makes his choice when facing destruction. I made mine. Let history judge." History is judging. The verdict remains complex. March 2025. The bunker site in West Java has been transformed. The Indonesian Ministry of Culture, in cooperation with Japanese historical organizations, has preserved the underground complex as a historical site. The concrete chambers are stabilized. The documents, photographs, and artifacts have been removed to climate-controlled archives, but the structure remains, accessible now by a series of stairs descending into the hillside. A small museum building, erected 100 meters from the bunker entrance, houses exhibits explaining Taman Yamaguchi's story. Photographs show the Rear Admiral in his prime, commanding carrier operations across the Pacific. Maps trace his escape route from Midway to Indonesia. Display cases contain selected diary pages, translated into Indonesian, English, and Japanese. The ceremonial dagger, after extensive debate, is displayed in the museum rather than returned to Japan, a symbolic acknowledgement that Yamaguchi's final years belonged to Indonesia, not to the nation he fled. The museum opened on June 5, 2025, exactly 83 years after Huryu sank. Attendance has been modest but steady. Indonesian students come to learn about the Japanese occupation period. Japanese tourists arrive, many elderly, some relatives of Pacific War veterans, seeking to understand what drove a respected officer to such desperate measures. American naval historians visit, recording interviews and conducting research that will reshape understanding of the Battle of Midway. The Indonesian government has designated the site as a place of historical reflection on war, duty, and survival. The designation is deliberately ambiguous. It neither glorifies nor condemns Yamaguchi. Instead, it asks visitors to grapple with the same questions Yamaguchi faced. What is duty when fulfilling it means certain death? What is honor when circumstances render traditional honor impossible? What is cowardice, and what is rational survival? In Japan, reaction to the discovery has been mixed. Some commentators express outrage that Yamaguchi's heroic narrative was false. Others express sympathy, arguing he faced impossible choices. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, successor to the Imperial Navy, issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging the discovery while emphasizing that the circumstances of 1942 were extraordinarily complex, and judgments made under such extreme pressures cannot be easily evaluated from our present perspective. Yamaguchi's family has remained largely silent. Akira Ishihara, the grandson who provided DNA samples, granted one interview in June 2025. "I never knew my grandfather," he said. "He died before I was born, truly died in 1960 or whenever it was in that bunker. My mother rarely spoke about him, and when she did, she called him a hero who died at Midway. Maybe she knew the truth. Maybe she didn't. Now the world knows. Does it change anything? He's still dead. The war is still over. The people he commanded still died at Midway. His survival didn't save them. Perhaps that's the real lesson. One man's survival or death rarely changes the larger outcome." The Indonesian discovery has also prompted renewed investigation into the Autumn Mist Network and other wartime escape systems. Researchers are now examining property records, banking documents, and immigration files across Southeast Asia, South America, and the Middle East, looking for other cases of presumed dead officers who actually survived. Preliminary estimates suggest dozens, possibly more than 100 cases exist. Each case requires careful verification. False identifications would be easy, given incomplete historical records. Some investigations have borne fruit. In August 2025, researchers in Argentina located documents suggesting a Japanese Army intelligence officer, supposedly killed in the Philippines in 1945, actually lived in Buenos Aires until 1967. In November 2025, Thai authorities reported finding a burial site near Chiang Mai containing remains tentatively identified as a Japanese naval officer listed as lost at sea in 1944. The pattern is clear. Yamaguchi was not unique. He was simply more successful than most at maintaining his false identity. What does this mean for historical understanding? It reveals that war creates not just heroes and villains, but also survivors, men who make pragmatic choices that defy traditional narratives. Some of these survivors committed crimes and escaped justice. Others, like Yamaguchi, simply escaped. The moral distinction matters, but so does the historical reality. Escape networks existed, many officers used them, and comfortable stories of honor and sacrifice often obscured more complicated truths. Standing at the bunker entrance on a humid afternoon in March 2025, looking down into the concrete chambers where Taman Yamaguchi spent his final years, you're confronted with physical evidence of one man's determination to survive. The chambers are cool, quiet, lit now by electric lights installed for museum visitors. The walls show water staining, places where tropical moisture seeped through the concrete over decades. The room where Yamaguchi's remains were found is marked by a small plaque. Here rested a man who chose life over honor and spent his remaining years in exile carrying that choice. The bunker kept its secret for 64 years. The volcanic soil of West Java covered the concrete, vegetation reclaimed the hillside, and the world moved on, believing the official story. Then a construction crew's excavator blade struck concrete, and a forgotten history emerged into daylight. How many other secrets remain buried? How many other bunkers, estates, graves hide evidence of escapes we haven't yet discovered? The Pacific is vast. Southeast Asia's jungles are deep. South America's remote regions are largely unexplored. And the men who escaped, officers with intelligence training, financial resources, and powerful motivations to stay hidden, built their false identities carefully. Sometimes the Earth keeps secrets for 82 years, sometimes longer, and sometimes, when least expected, those secrets surface, forcing us to revise history, reconsider judgment, and acknowledge that the narratives we've believed for generations might have been convenient fictions all along. Taman Yamaguchi died in 1960, 16 years after history said he died, in a bunker he built to hide from a world that believed he was already gone. His survival changed nothing about the war's outcome. Japan still lost. Midway still marked the turning point. The men who died still died. But his survival reveals something about human nature that comfortable historical narratives often conceal. When facing destruction, some men choose death with honor, and others choose life with shame. Neither choice is simple. Neither choice is entirely wrong. The question that lingers as visitors leave the museum and climb back up to the Indonesian sunlight is this: how many others made Yamaguchi's choice? And how many of their secrets still wait beneath the earth, behind false names, in archives that haven't yet been searched, in memories that died with the last people who knew the truth? The bunker in West Java has yielded its secret, but the world is full of bunkers, and the past is full of men who chose to disappear. We've found one. How many more remain undiscovered? History, we're learning, isn't finished with the Pacific War. The war is 79 years over, but its secrets keep surfacing. Taman Yamaguchi's story won't be the last. It's simply the first we've confirmed. The real question is, whose bunker will the next construction crew uncover, and what story will it tell?